So there was some Star Wars news that came out a week ago at this point, and I actually didn't hear about this until just a couple days ago. Is Ryan Gosling is in talks to star in Shawn Levy's Star Wars movie, and of all the Star Wars movies that have been announced, Shawn Levy's Star Wars movie seems the most likely to get made because Shawn Levy is the same director behind Deadpool and Wolverine. So if you're looking at it from a business logic standpoint, is that it's a lot easier to sell a movie under the line from the director of Deadpool and Wolverine than trying to sell something like Rogue Squadron. But the biggest thing is that no one really talked about this news when it came out. No one was talking about, Ryan Gosling in talks to star in a Star Wars movie or Shawn Levy's Star Wars movie in general. And in this video, I actually want to go over the why. This video has nothing to do with Ryan Gosling allegedly in talks to join Star Wars. I more want to focus on why no one is really talking about this news, why no one is really excited for Star Wars anymore. And I've come down to 5 talking points. Theoretically, we could be here for like the next 2-3 hours, but let's just distill it down to 5 talking points just for the sake of time. So the first point that I want to bring up for why no one is excited for Star Wars anymore is the biggest elephant in the room, which is the sequel trilogy, episodes 7, 8, 9. At this point in time, early 2025, there is no denying the amount of damage that the sequel trilogy has done to Star Wars. Okay, when Force Awakens came out in 2015, everyone rejoiced, and this is the return of Star Wars! But as time has gone on, more and more people have started to see The Force Awakens for what it truly was, in that it was nothing but a soft reboot of A New Hope, and a bad soft reboot at that. And not only that, Episode 7 for The Force Awakens was effectively all set up with no payoff. The Force Awakens sets up a whole lot of story threads for the sequel trilogy to basically work with, like the Knights of Ren, who are Rey's parents, and what happened by the time Last Jedi came out. Oh yeah, The Last Jedi felt like a complete retcon because The Force Awakens was all set up. The Force Awakens relied upon its sequels to deliver on all of this setup. And by the way, whatever happened to the Knights of Ren? Oh, that's right. That entire angle pretty much got abandoned by episodes 8 and 9. And there's many more things. And if we're talking about what was the biggest quote unquote mystery of the sequel trilogy with who were Rey's parents, everyone called it by the end of The Force Awakens is that, well, she's either Luke's daughter or Luke's niece. And instead of just rolling with the punches that, okay, the audience figured this out very, very quickly, no, by the time you get to Rise of Skywalker, they have to change it completely to say that Rey was a Palpatine. Which up to that point made absolutely no sense because there was absolutely no foreshadowing. And, let's actually discuss Rise of Skywalker, right? The infamous line, somehow Palpatine returned. And how did Palpatine return? Who fucking cares? Because there was absolutely no foreshadowing in The Force Awakens or The Last Jedi to indicate that Emperor Palpatine had somehow survived the explosion of the second Death Star. So again, the infamous line, it became the meme somehow Palpatine returned. Again, you went from The Force Awakens, which was a universally beloved movie at the time, more people are seeing for what it is now. Then you have The Last Jedi, which was incredibly divisive. You either loved the movie or you hated it. There was zero in between. And then you get to Rise of Skywalker, a movie that attempted to please everybody, but ended up pleasing no one. And in fact, creating more questions than answers. So again, why is no one really excited for Star Wars anymore? Well, look at all the damage that was done with the sequel trilogy, which then leads into my next point, is that there's just been way too many bad Star Wars shows, and it's the concept of brand dilution, right? The sequel trilogy, out of that came The Mandalorian, the first season of The Mandalorian on Disney Plus, and everybody went fucking nuts for The Mandalorian and Baby Yoda back in 2019. Right? People forget how big of a cultural phenomenon The Mandalorian is. The Mandalorian, for all intents and purposes, should not have worked, but it did. And what that led to is, okay, the future of Star Wars is not in the movies. The future of Star Wars is in TV. And so what they did is that they greenlit so many butt-fucking shows, and a good number of them are either average at best or terrible at worst. Okay, after Mandalorian Season 1, we got Mandalorian Season 2, and if we're being honest about Mandalorian Season 2 didn't really start getting good until Episode 4. And to put that into perspective, there's only 8 episodes in Season 2 of The Mandalorian, same with Season 1. And Season 2 of The Mandalorian didn't start getting good until Episode 4. Then you had the Book of Boba Fett, which pretty much became a meme in and of itself, where, you had Tamura Morrison coming out and basically saying, something along the lines of that the fact that Boba Fett talks too much, which, if you've watched the Book of Boba Fett, everybody pretty much agreed. And then you infamously had the Power Rangers meme that formed out of the Book of Boba Fett. I would play it for you here, but Saban would probably claim the meme at this point, so I'm not going to. Right, then you had not only that, one other part I forgot about Book of Boba Fett is that at one point in the show titled Book of Boba Fett took a backseat in his own show, and it became The Mandalorian Season 2.5. And then you get to Mandalorian Season 3, and Mandalorian Season 3 wasn't as well received. You had the Obi-Wan Kenobi series, which was basically just legalized fan fiction about Obi-Wan needing to go save a young Princess Leia. You had the Ahsoka series that pretty much came and went. The Acolyte was canceled after one season. The biggest show was Andor. That's like one of the shows that everyone who watched it praised it. And Tony Gilroy famously said this to IndieWire. He said something to the effect of that, we thought that the audience was going to embrace the show and that we would have to chase the critics, but the opposite happened. We have all this critical praise, but the audience is not there watching the show. And the second and final season of Andor is coming out this year in 2025, which leads into my next point is Skeleton Crew's low ratings, which, again, Skeleton Crew, another show that actually did receive a lot of praise. Now, in my opinion, Skeleton Crew is the one Star Wars show that should have gotten ripped apart, because Skeleton Crew was basically just the Goonies set in outer space. But there's this article from Game Rant here that came out 2 weeks ago. It came out January 14th. I missed it at the time. Star Wars Skeleton Crew ratings set new franchise low. Star Wars Skeleton Crew episodes 1 to 2 ratings set a new franchise record. Unfortunately, it's likely not the record Lucasfilm and Disney hoped for, and it may squash chances for Star Wars Skeleton Crew Season 2. Star Wars Skeleton Crew reviews were largely positive when the series premiered, and those favorable sentiments only grew as the series progressed. While some people have criticized Star Wars Skeleton Crew for essentially being the Goonies in space, Most have praised the series for bringing the franchise back to its roots by telling a simple yet fun adventure story. The young characters, Ravika Bukanier's Whim, Fern, KB, and Neil, have also endeared themselves to most fans, and Jude Law's mysterious Joe Nawwood Joe Nawwood, I think is how you pronounce his name, has proven to be an interesting and engaging foil for the youngsters. However, the positive response hasn't yielded the viewership Disney likely wanted. According to Nielsen, December 2nd to 8th streaming data, Star Wars Skeleton Crew premiered with the lowest viewership of any Star Wars series in its first week. The 2-episode premiere scored less than 382 million minutes watched. This is roughly 20% lower than the ratings for Star Wars The Acolyte's premiere week, the previous record holder for the lowest viewership of any Star Wars series debut. Star Wars Skeleton also became the first series in the franchise to fail to debut in Disney Plus's top 10 originals. So, again, I'm not here to debate whether or not Skeleton Crew was a good show. I personally have not watched it because it basically is just the Goonies in outer space. But still, it goes to show you it doesn't matter how good a show was received. Andor had the exact same problems. Everybody liked Andor. Everybody who watched it said that Andor was actually really good, was actually one of the best Star Wars shows on Disney+. But no one watched it. Skeleton Crew got rave reviews from all the people who watched it. Yet, according to the ratings, even fewer people watched Skeleton Crew than The Acolyte. Is it possible that there were people that were waiting for the entire show to drop at once so that they could binge it? Yes and no. In my humble opinion of that actually makes up a small minority of people. You could argue that, word of mouth will eventually build and people will tune in to Skeleton Crew, blah, 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 blah. But I would also argue that the failure of Skeleton Crew also speaks to Disney Star Wars as a whole, right? You have to now, going back to the sequel trilogy and then going back to all of these other Disney Plus shows, you have to trudge through so much crap in order to get to the good stuff, that the effort to get to the good stuff, the effort to get up to Andor or to Skeleton Crew or to Mandalorian seasons 1 and 2 just simply isn't worth the effort to have to trudge through all that crap. And let's also not forget how Disney inadvertently killed the Mandalorian by the sudden firing of Gina Carano. So you have all this stuff that was set up in the second season that was going to lead into Rangers of the New Republic that now is going to all but be abandoned, which leads into my fourth point, is basically the amount of announcements and quiet cancellations. Right? Rangers of the New Republic was set to be a new Disney Plus show that was going to be a spinoff of The Mandalorian. That show was pretty much dead in the water with the firing of Gina Carano. There was supposed to be a Boba Fett movie that then got turned into the Disney Plus series that was going to be directed by Josh Trank. Very famously, Lord and Miller were fired from Solo: A Star Wars Story. And Ron Howard came in and replaced him. But very famously, Ron Howard had to go back and reshoot. Well, I think the final figure came out to like 80% of Solo: A Star Wars Story had to basically be reshot. So Disney pretty much paid for 2 movies in one. Colin Trevorrow was originally going to write and direct episode 9, and there was a whole big brouhaha back in 2019, like a month or two before Rise of Skywalker came out, where the script for Colin Trevorrow's episode 9 came out. I don't believe it was ever confirmed to be Colin Trevorrow's episode 9, but there was a quote unquote script leak of episode 9, Duel of the Fates. And everyone was going through and how much they loved it. But again, I don't think it was ever confirmed that was Colin Trevorrow's episode 9 script. I could be wrong. This was a few years ago, so I don't really remember that much detail about it. Again, entirely possible that I'm wrong, but I don't think it was ever confirmed. But yeah, you have all these. Star Wars Rogue Squadron that was going to come from Patty Jenkins has been quietly canceled. I mean, look at the Rey movie. I'll just tie in my fifth talking point right here. You have this like standalone Rey movie now has its fourth writer attached. That just came out a few days ago, January 24th, 2025. This article from the Hollywood Reporter: Daisy Ridley's Star Wars movie enlists writer George Nolfi. The scribe behind Ocean's 12 is delayed to take on New Jedi Order. George Nolfi, known for his screenplay work on movies such as The Bourne Ultimatum and Ocean's 12, has been tapped to write New Jedi Order, the Daisy Ridley-centric Star Wars movie, basically the Rey movie. The hiring signals continued faith in the project. Bullshit. It doesn't signal continued faith because you've had so many different writers attached to the Rey movie. There also, a few months ago, I'm remembering that there was an untitled Star Wars movie that had a December 2026 release date that got canceled. Everybody speculated that the movie that got canceled was the Rey movie, but that theory has been dispelled when you have the fourth writer basically get hired to take on the standalone the standalone Rey movie. So yeah, the only Star Wars movie now to come out is Mandalorian and Grogu, set for May 2026. But still, basically what you have is you have all of these announcements of all these movies. So something like Rogue Squadron. Okay, Patty Jenkins' Rogue Squadron gets announced. Patty Jenkins' Rogue Squadron then has a slight production setback, which you could argue is normal in the world of filmmaking. Okay, fine. Then it gets delayed, and then it gets announced that it's delayed indefinitely, and then after a while, you just never hear about the movie. You just never hear about the movie anymore. Again, with all of these announcements and quiet cancellations, because Disney Lucasfilm never comes out publicly and confirms cancellations. They just don't talk about the announcements anymore. Again, where's Rangers of the New Republic? Right, that show was announced, I believe back in 2021 after the it was either 2020 or 2021. I think it was 2020. I think it was announced like while Mandalorian season 2 was airing. Right, that was okay. To put that into perspective, that was 4 or 5 years ago. At this point, where's Rangers of the New Republic? You don't hear about it anymore. So again, all of these movies and shows that get announced and then they quietly get canceled, no one really hears about them. The only thing that Disney Lucasfilm is accomplishing is basically creating this cynicism within the fan base. Why should I have any faith that Daisy Ridley's, standalone Rey movie is going to be made at this point when Disney Lucasfilm's track record is that it's going to have production problem, and then it's going to have one delay, then it's going to have another delay, then it's going to be delayed indefinitely, and then all of a sudden you just stop hearing about it as if the announced movie or announced Disney Plus show just simply never existed. Again, to tie this back into the very beginning, because I did talk about, the Ryan Gosling in talks to star in Shawn Levy's Star Wars movie. This is the one movie that everyone should have been, this is the one movie everybody should have been talking about. It's this is the one Star Wars movie that should be getting made, because this Star Wars movie is going to be from the director of Deadpool and Wolverine, which was arguably one of the biggest movies of 2024. So again, you have Shawn Levy attached to direct a Star Wars movie. Okay, here's the one movie that could be made. It doesn't matter if Ryan Gosling is going to be in it or not. Even if they come out and announce that the talks fall through, that's okay, because Shawn Levy's Star Wars movie is still coming out. But all you heard was just crickets. and even more crickets. Nobody's talking about this anymore because of all of the reasons that I have brought up prior. You have the damage that the sequel trilogy caused. You have way too many Disney Plus shows that are either mediocre at best or terrible at worst, which has only contributed to absolute brand dilution, that then bled into Skeleton Crew, even though Skeleton Crew, according to people that watched it, was a really good show. Same with Andor, but again, because of the brand dilution and the damage that the sequel trilogy caused, you now have to trudge through so much crap in order to get to the good stuff, that getting to the good stuff isn't worth the effort of having to trudge through all that shit. And finally, the cynicism within the fan base because of all these movies and shows that get announced and then never come out, and then Disney Lucasfilm just never talks about them anymore. This is why, in my opinion, no one is excited for Star Wars anymore.